Hello, Hi Rock. Welcome to our daily devotion and happy October. We are continuing with the final week of our exploration of some of the prophets in conjunction with our Sunday sermon series. And today we return to looking at Hosea, and we're going to be in chapter 8. Just as a reminder, the beginning of Hosea is Hosea being instructed to marry Gomer. I guess together they can have the name of Homer. Hosea is instructed to marry Gomer, and Gomer is a prostitute. And this relationship becomes a living illustration, a living parable of how Israel has been unfaithful, like Gomer has been unfaithful. Israel has been unfaithful to God. And then in these chapters that we're in now, God is laying out some of the charges, explaining the ways that Israel has been unfaithful. And today we're going to be in Hosea chapter 8, verses 1 through 7, where we come to a very famous saying, and we'll unpack what that saying means. So we're in Hosea chapter 8, verses 1 through 7, where we read the following. Sound the alarm. The enemy descends like an eagle on the people of the Lord, for they have broken my covenant and revolted against my law. Now Israel pleads with me, help us, for you are our God. But it is too late. The people of Israel have rejected what is good, and now their enemies will chase after them. The people have appointed kings without my consent, and princes without my approval. By making idols for themselves from their silver and gold, they have brought about their own destruction. O Samaria, I reject this calf, this idol you have made. My fury burns against you. How long will you be incapable of innocence? This calf you worship, O Israel, was crafted by your own hands. It is not God. Therefore, it must be smashed to bits. They have planted the wind and will harvest the whirlwind. The stalks of grain wither and produce nothing to eat. And even if there is any grain, foreigners will eat it. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. First, there is a warning that starts off in an illustrated fashion. And it says that sound the alarm. The enemy descends like an eagle on the people of the Lord, for they have broken my covenant and revolted against my law. The people of Israel have rejected what is good, and now their enemies will chase after them. But what did Israel do exactly? How did they reject what is good? Well, this section lists out 3 different ways that Israel had rejected what is good, 2 of which are covered in our passage today. But if you want to know all 3, the first is a poor choice of leaders, which we see in their choice of kings and princes. Second of all, we see a corrupt religion, which is connected to their poor choice of leaders. And 3, their foreign pagan alliances that corrupt them. And that's not going to be in today's passage. So first, God is unhappy about their choices of leaders. In this case, their choice of kings. In verse 4, it says, the people have appointed kings without my consent. Let me get that passage here. The people have appointed kings without my consent and princes without my approval. Now, normally you don't get to choose your king. That's kind of what it means to have a king, right? But in this case, they broke away. Israel, the northern kingdom, had broken away from King Solomon's son, and they followed a king named Jeroboam. And ever since then, they never seemed to choose or even seek God's guidance in their selection of subsequent kings. And in particular, Jeroboam set up golden calves as idols. Verse 5, it says, O Samaria, I reject this calf, this idol you have made. My fury burns against you. How long will you be incapable of innocence? It is not God. This calf you worship, Israel, was crafted by your own hands. It is not God. Therefore, it must be smashed to bits. Now, why does Israel keep returning to a golden calf? Like, why a golden calf? One of the first and most awful moments of betrayal of God in their history was when Moses went up to the mountain to meet with God. And in the meantime, Aaron made a golden calf for the people to worship. Now, why would they want to repeat that mistake, this worst of all moments? Why would they want to do it all over again? What is it about calves or cows that keeps pulling them in? Well, actually, there is a very basic reason why people might turn to a cow over and over again as a symbol of God. In the ancient world, you had 5 basic needs that could be provided for by the animals that you raised. One is food, as you might suspect. You can eat it, either eat the animal or the milk it provides, and basically all animals can do this. Second thing the animal provides is clothing. The skins can be used to make leather, and most animals can provide this leather. I mean, obviously not small animals or chickens, things like that, but cows, sheep, pigs, camels, they can all provide leather for clothing. So there's food and clothing. Third is fuel, and this might not seem quite obvious, but you need to make fires. You need to be able to cook food and do other things with fires. But you're living in a desert land where trees and other sources of fuel are, typical, what we would typically think of as sources of fuel are pretty rare. So in a desert environment, what do they burn as fuel? Well, they actually burn dried dung. Now, all animals can provide this, but cows are really excel at providing this and giving you a big concentrated dose in one place. And so, in desert societies, cows provide a tremendous amount, a tremendous proportion of the fuel that they would use for their fires. So you have food, you have clothing, you have fuel. Next, power. You need an animal to pull your plow. Human beings are pretty weak compared to a number of animals. Now, a sheep is not going to pull your plow. A pig is not going to pull your plow. But a cow, or in this case, an oxen, excels at pulling plows. So cow is just really starting to rise above the rest. Finally, the fifth need that you would have from animals in an ancient society is transportation. And that same cow that can pull your plow can also pull your cart. So you have food, clothing, fuel, power, and transportation. And the cow provides all of that. The cow is your one-stop shop. It is your total provider. And so the five basic needs that could be provided for by animals in the ancient world, those are it. And only the cow can provide all of them. So for the ancient world, the cow is in many ways the ultimate symbol of total care and provision. Sort of like, we don't have the equivalent today. Probably the closest thing for us is just simply money. But for them, the cow could provide just about anything someone might need, in the same way that money might provide for us, or in a similar way to that money might provide for us today. And so this is very likely the reason that Israel kept turning to golden calves despite their tragic history. So Israel turned away from God through choosing powerful but ungodly leaders, and by choosing to mix their worship of God with their worship of materialism and physical provisions, what we might simply call wealth. And next, God gives them an enduring metaphor for their unwise choices. In verse 7, he says, "They have planted the wind and will harvest the whirlwind. The stalks of grain wither and produce nothing to eat. And even if there's any grain, foreigners will eat it." This first sentence in verse 7, they have planted the wind and will harvest the whirlwind. Other translations have a more poetic phrasing for this that has survived in our culture to this day. Have you ever heard someone make mention of reaping the whirlwind? I remember hearing that a number of times in places, wondering, what does that mean? What does it mean to reap the whirlwind? Well, this is where that saying originates. The idea is that you sow the wind, you plant the wind. Seems like a strange metaphor, but hold on. You plant the wind, but reap the whirlwind. And so this is built into this whole biblical idea of sowing and reaping, planting and harvesting. Now, what is sown, like what is planted, seems tiny and inconsequential, kind of like the seed that you put into the earth. It seems so tiny. And yet the harvest that comes from that seed, over time, that harvest can become absolutely tremendous. And Israel's choices, their idolatry, their selfishness, their compromise, all these things seemed harmless at first, kind of like sowing the wind. You're planting the wind, you're sowing something that is so harmless and inconsequential. What harm can come from the wind? But here, as it's, as the metaphor explains, the harvest can be devastating. That wind that you plant, that seed that you plant, can become the whirlwind, can become the tornado. And with two hurricanes off the coast right now, many of us are quite familiar with the power that wind can generate. For those who live in Tornado Alley or other places that get hit hard by tornadoes, people can understand the power that something as insubstantial as the wind can generate. And that's the metaphor here, is like your sin to you seems so tiny, so small, so inconsequential. What harm could come of it? But when you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. It seems harmless, but it has devastating consequences. So I think the natural question for us as we consider this passage, beyond the historical context, as we think about ways that it might apply to us today, how might we be making the same mistake that Israel was making? I think the natural question for us to ask is simply, what am I sowing? What am I planting? What am I doing that builds towards a future harvest? There's an old saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, right? Journey of 1,000 miles seems incredibly long, but a single step is how it starts. I remember when I was doing my 500 mile section hike on the Appalachian Trail from West Virginia all the way back to Massachusetts. And that first day, I covered, I don't know, I think it was like 8 or 10 miles. And it seems like such a small thing, but that's how that journey starts. And that's how it continues. And every step in the wrong direction is a step that you're going to have to make. It's so every step you make in the wrong direction, it means two steps that you have to go, because it's the step you went in the wrong direction and the step you have to make back. And so there's an old saying that I actually was recently sharing with my son. This idea of sowing and reaping, and just applying it to our lives and saying, you sow a thought and reap an action. You sow an action and you reap a habit. You sow a habit and you reap a character. You sow a character and you reap a destiny. There's this chain of events that all starts with how we think and how we act. Those things might seem small, they might seem inconsequential, kind of like the wind, like a breath, seem like nothing. But if we sow the wind, God warns that we will reap. One day we will reap the whirlwind. If we take a step towards a certain destination and add enough more steps, eventually we will reach that destination. So the question is, what is the destination towards which we are heading at? Do our steps align with where we truly want to go? And do they align with whom we want to be? So with all that in mind, let's pray. Our good and gracious God, we thank you for the words of the prophets. We thank you for the examples of people's successes and failures that have been recorded for us, so that we might hopefully learn from the mistakes of others rather than having to repeat them ourselves. Lord, may we take this warning and this encouragement to heart, that whatever we sow, we will reap. And it may seem inconsequential at first, but over time, those small things build up into things of incredible power. So today, Lord, through your Spirit, help us to sow things that are good, not to be like Israel here, who had abandoned everything good, but instead, Lord, to be sowing good things, sowing things that will lead to a harvest of the fruit of the Spirit, that we will experience the love, joy, and peace, patience, and everything else that comes with being a child of you, and the ways that you want to provide for us. Help us to not look to the world and material things to provide our ultimate security and significance, but rather to look to you, that you are the God who provides. We thank you for your ultimate provision in Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. Everyone, thanks for joining with us today, and I hope you have a great day, and really take to heart, consider the ways, consider what you are sowing today and what kind of harvest that will lead to later on. Go in peace.